So much of doing well on LSAT reading comp comes down to knowing what not to do rather than what to do. Today, I'll share with you some strategies that help me improve my LSAT score significantly on the reading comp section in particular. For those who don't know me, my name is Steve Schwartz. I've been teaching the LSAT since 2005, and I personally increased my own LSAT score from a 152 to a 175. Now, back when I took the LSAT, there were only about half the number of LSAT reading comp passages available relative to the amount available today, which is why it still continues to surprise me more than ever before when folks recommend using publications like The Economist or Scientific American to help you get more comfortable with, more familiar with LSAT reading comp material. You have about 400 actual official real LSAT reading comp passages available, and most students won't have time to do even a small fraction of them. I'd recommend using some for drills, using some for timed sections, and saving some for full-length timed practice tests. But unless you're taking the LSAT more than 6 months from now, more than a year from now, you're probably not going to be able to do all of them as it is. So I wouldn't want you to ever use publications like The Economist or Scientific American at the expense of using real, actual LSAT reading material. So the first step here is just stick with the actual real reading comp passages released by LSAC. You can get them in Books of 10 on Amazon, but even better is using LSAC's Law Hub Advantage platform, which is the only platform that replicates exactly what you'll see on LSAT test day itself. Now, over the course of my nearly 20 years teaching the LSAT, I have found that far too many students rely on highlighting, underlining, and note-taking, which is problematic for a couple of reasons, the biggest one being that it costs you valuable time. With standard timing, you have only 8 minutes and 45 seconds to read the passage and solve the associated questions. Now, given that there are about 7 questions per passage, that means that if you spend more than 2 minutes reading the passage, you already have less than a minute per question. I certainly want you going that much below that benchmark, so I recommend max 3 minutes on average reading the passage, then save the rest of your time for solving the questions associated. Now, a top-level LSAT scorer recognizes that you don't need to do the questions in the order provided, but instead, you can strategically choose the order of approach that is best for you. What I found has worked personally for me is to solve the general global questions first, like main idea, primary purpose, passage organization, best title, tone, author's opinion, everything big picture, zoomed out, and save the detail-oriented questions for later after you've laid the groundwork, after you've laid the foundation. Because after all, if you don't know the main idea, you don't really know anything, and that sets the stage for your success later in the passage. The details, you can always go back to the passage to find them when you need them to help you solve a specific question. And of course, save the inferential questions for last because those are going to be the most time consuming. And you got to remember that every single question on the LSAT is worth the same. You don't want to risk getting bogged down or stuck on any one question and run the risk of never even getting to one of the easier questions associated with the passage. Now, I'll share some strategies you can use for reading comp in just a moment, but first I wanted to let you know that if you're looking for more strategies like this, at LSAT Unplugged, we offer live online classes via Zoom, on-demand video courses, small group coaching, and one-on-one coaching to help you on your journey to scoring 175 or above. You can check out the links below to find out more and to book a call with me and my team. We'd be glad to help you out. Now, I mentioned you've got about 400 real LSAT reading comp passages, and you could save some for drills. What might those drills look like? You could take some passages where all you do is you read the passage and you solve the general global main idea questions associated. The reason knowing the main idea is so important is because, of course, it sets the stage, but also because it gives you LSAC's articulation of the main idea, which may help crystallize or clarify your own understanding. LSAC, of course, is going to perhaps include a bit more nuance than you would. They'll certainly write it in perhaps a more technical way, but also perhaps a more precise way. And so if you can solve that main idea question, especially if you're solving it simply through process of elimination, you will have a better handle on what the passage is actually saying, and that could help you solve some of the other global questions associated, and maybe even some of those tougher inferential questions associated as well. You could also save some passages for an exercise, which I call dumbing it down. You basically rewrite the entire passage in simpler language as if you were going to explain to a 5-year-old. This helps you prove to yourself that you truly understand what the passage is saying. When I ask a student to tell me what the passage said, and they just reread the passage word for word, what they're telling me is they don't really understand the passage. Same goes for logical reasoning. If you just reread the stimulus, when I ask you what the passage or stimulus is saying, and you reread it, that tells me once again, you don't really get it, because you don't really understand something unless you can rewrite it or restate it in your own words without looking back at the text. This is harder than you might think. Try it out for yourself if you want to see what it's like. I typically find that students don't really understand it until they can paraphrase it or rewrite it. So I think to myself, how could I explain this to a 5-year-old? How could I dumb it down and simplify it as much as possible? Of course, this is to be done untimed, not during timed conditions. But if you're having trouble solving any reading comp questions, this is a good exercise to try out. Now, a lot of students have trouble with the so-called dual passages or comparative passages, which are shorter, but it doesn't mean they're any easier, because most of the questions will be associated with both of the two passages, meaning that you need to see what are their points of overlap, what are their points of agreement, what are their points of disagreement. And so what you might want to do is engage in this exercise for both of the passages at once. They started in June 2007 and appeared on every single LSAT prep test since then. You rewrite both passages in simpler language. You clarify for yourself what is the main idea, what is the central idea of each of them. And then on test day itself and during your practice test, what you do is you check the questions first to see if there is any question associated with only one of those two passages. If so, you read that passage only and solve only that question associated with that specific passage. That way you can avoid cluttering your mind with what the other passage was saying. You could also try doing the dual or comparative passages either first or last, since they require maybe a different way of thinking than the 3 longer passages will. Anyway, folks, that's all for now. I hope you found this video helpful, and in the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.